Rise up!
This is the Rise Up See Red podcast, all about the Arizona Cardinals and the NFL, featuring insider and outsider perspectives. Enjoy the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. Now here are your hosts, Jess Root and Seth Cox.
Hello, Arizona Cardinals fans, and welcome to the latest edition of the Rise Up See Red podcast. I'm your host, Jess Root, from CardsWire.com, the NFL wire site that covers the Arizona Cardinals, in our episode 522. It's the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web, and this is the second of our Combine shows. Seth Cox is with me as is normally the case from RevengeOfTheBirds.com, SB Nation's Arizona Cardinals site. And again, as we've done for years, and this for the second time this week, we have his co-host from the original Draft Breakdown podcast, Justin Higdon. Justin and Seth have been doing the show over there on the Draft podcast for years. If you haven't started listening to it, you should. You should definitely sign up for the Patreon tier, where for $2 a month you get their bonus shows, which right now is the time of year to get that, because especially right now, this is the time to do it as you're leading up to the draft. Get to know different positions, different players, their positional rankings, which are coming up. It's a good time right now, and Justin has been extremely busy between his personal life, professional life, and the draft stuff. We happen to have this a perfect week to do it, so thank you, Jay, for being on for, what is this, like 3 or 4 years or more? I don't even know how many years we've been doing this.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. I love doing the show with you guys. It's one of my favorite ones to do, because usually this time of year, Seth and I are doing 3 shows during the week, and it gives us an opportunity to talk about so many different players, because otherwise we kind of be pigeonholed with time constraints and things like that. So I'm happy to be with you guys.
So yeah, between this show, the show we had earlier in the week, and then their shows, that is a lot of Combine content. We are going to focus on the defensive side of the ball. If you listen to our offensive show, that was an extra large episode. Hopefully we don't have to put you through to that much talk this time around. But we're going to start on the defensive side of the ball with the defensive interior. And then we'll kind of break this down into we'll start with interior, then we'll go edge and linebackers, and we'll go defensive backs, and if there's any specials we're talking about, probably not. But the Cardinals especially, they have so little talent on the interior defensive line. This is a position of extreme need. How deep is the defensive line class, the defensive tackle class this year?
This is a great year to need defensive interior, Jess. I mean, there's not the fanfare of a Jalen Carter or Quinnen Williams that there have been in the past, but I think there's guys that have legitimate all-pro potential, and there's going to be a number of guys at the 35th or 27th to start, but the 35th pick, and
their 3 third-round picks.
Yeah, all in the 3rd round that will fit what this team needs. And the nice thing is there's a little bit of everything. And so, you kick things off for me, and Justin knows how I feel about this guy. And I've been talking about this guy for now 2 years, Johnny Newton from Illinois. And he didn't test this weekend. He had a Jones fracture, had surgery in January, but he came in and measured in, short, 6'2", 304. So he's got 30 pounds on me. So, we're virtually the same type of athlete at this point with our feet issues. But, I mean, this is a guy that, I love the comparison that you've been seeing going around. It makes a lot of sense to me, Javon Hargrave. And I know Hargrave ended up going in the 3rd round, but there's a little bit of a difference between a guy going from South Carolina State to the NFL and Illinois. We were talking with our buddy Kyle Posey about this guy earlier today. He was the Big Ten Defensive Player of the Year. So, not a great conference, obviously. Michigan, Michigan and Ohio State and all those schools. And he's, the Big Ten player or defensive player of the year. This is a guy that is just produced. And one of the things that Justin and I talk about, and the reason that I prefer him over everybody else is who was the next best player to him. And I know Devon Witherspoon was there last year, and that was really helpful and impactful. But you look at it, like, this is a guy that did a couple of things that Jess and I talk about all the time. One, got better every single year. I mean, 1.5 to 3.5 to 5.5 to 7.5 sacks. Produced at a high level, despite, you go into any of these things and you look at it and you say, oh, give me all the prospects from Illinois, and there's not any, right? Like, I mean, there's Jerzon Newton, and then there's some guys. I mean, we talked about Tip Ryman on the other show, a day 3 tight end.
You got Isaiah Williams, a day 3 receiver, but you don't have much outside of Johnny Newton, and but he was legitimately the best defensive tackle in the Big Ten, and we saw the national champion come out of the Big Ten this year. So I know you said I know your dig at the Big Ten was tongue in cheek, but it really is. I mean, this is a good defensive tackle class, and it's especially good if you don't want to pay a high price for a defensive tackle, which Seth and I don't like to generally do that unless he's a great pass rusher. How many Aaron Donalds are you going to get? But you've got Johnny Newton, who had 7.5 sacks, and he is that penetrating defensive tackle pass rusher that I think is pretty rare. So you're seeing his name in the mock drafts in the first round, and then beyond him, it kind of gets a little bit murkier. But you have a lot of good pass rush types that are small. They're on the small side, under 300 pounds. You think of an NFL defensive tackle and you think of like Vince Wilfork, but that's kind of a dinosaur now. What you want is the guys that can get in and push that pocket and force that quarterback outside at the very least so that your defensive ends can clean it up. So, but there are some really good players here that you're going to get in the 3rd and 4th round range. And that's my estimation. Tell me if you disagree, guys.
No, I think you're right. And you look at it and the names at the top are Newton and Byron Murphy. And then from there, you've got day 2 guys. Braden Fisk made a ton of money this weekend, right? I mean, this guy was,
and at the
Senior Bowl too.
Correct. Yeah, I was going to say that, Jess. He's an older guy though. He's already 24.
Yeah, but and I was talking with somebody about this, Justin, and this is a interesting kind of a hypothesis. I think that could actually play well for him because we've talked about it on our show and how long it takes defensive linemen to mature in the NFL. So you come in a little older, a little more mature, a little, physically more ready to go. Jess, I think it was Jonathan Gannon talked about they just want these guys playing 60% of the snaps. Yeah. There's no reason that Braden Fisk doesn't come in year 1 and play 60% of the snaps. And you're talking about a guy that you get, at that pick 35 range and a guy that produced well at Western Michigan, went from 2.5 to 4 to 6 sacks.
I love that he went up from Western Michigan to Florida State and didn't lose the production. Like that's a big thing.
That's a big
not at
thing.
all, man. I mean, 6 sacks again this year at Florida State. And so this is a guy.
There was a guy that played for the Cardinals that came from Central Michigan to Wisconsin and ended up being a pretty good player.
Exactly. Right.
I'm not comparing Fisk to JJ, but
but you look at it and you've got a guy that came in at 6'4", 292, tested through the roof. I mean, this is
4.78, absurd.
Yeah,
but I mean that's at 4.78 at 292 pounds.
And then I mean the 4.37 shuttle on top of that was just this is a guy that is, he's an electric athlete at the position, and so when you look at it, he's just one to watch. But then you go down the line, like Justin said. I mean, this is a group that is just elite. I mean, you have
you want to look
Jenkins.
You want to look at the sub 540s on these interior linemen. You've got
nuts.
Or Horo out of Clemson 4.89, Dwayne Carter Duke 4.99. You got Fisk 4.78, Makai Wingo LSU 4.85, Chris Jenkins Michigan 4.91, Jaden Cremediate Michigan Mississippi State 4.97, Darius Robinson Missouri 4.95, Brandon Dorleth out of Oregon 4.85, Byron Murphy 4.87. That's absurd. That's absurd for those big guys.
And you got guys like Gabe Hall and Mason Smith running in the low fives, 503 for Gabe Hall at 291. Mason Smith at 6'5", 306. He was a former 5-star we would be talking about him in the first round if he had got injured in a fluky celebration like Bill Grammatica type of injury. He ran 501 with 35-inch arms too. By the way, Jess, we were talking about small hands on Ola Fashanu. Mason Smith, 6'5", 306, 35-inch arms, 8.5-inch hands. Another weird one.
It exists.
Yeah, another weird one.
So the nice thing is if you drop both of them, they can share gloves.
But
that one's maybe slightly more concerning because you got to tackle guys. You got to grab guys.
Right. Yes, that's true. I would say that, but the 35-inch arms, man, from a guy who's 6'5", 306, like, how are you going to get it in on this guy's pads? How are you going to block that guy? I think I really like Mason Smith he's kind of I don't know, Seth, will he go day 2? Because the production is not there, but everything else about this guy screams that he should be a first-round pick.
100%, and that's what the question is, and that's the nice thing about this draft overall with the defensive tackle group, Jess, and why needing one is so nice, because this is the year to get one or two, and the reason you can get two is you can get different types of guys. I mean, you can get Braden Fisk at 35, and then come back and get a guy like Mason Smith.
You said you got 2 third-round picks.
Right. Grab him at 90.
They've got 3. They've got 3 third-round picks.
Three third-round picks, yeah.
Even better.
And so there's
this is a guy who's not even 22 years old. And the concern was the injury, right, Seth? But
right.
He did all the testing. He did all the testing except the bench press.
And this is just a fun group, and you mentioned a name like Dwayne Carter. I mean, he's getting pushed down because of playing at Duke and being there, staying the whole time, and now all of a sudden that's a punish thing, right? Like for some of these guys, and he played the extra year, stayed for the COVID year. He didn't have a huge productive season this year, but like the 2 years before that, he had 4.5 and 5.5 sacks on again Duke. I mean. I
think the stigma is less about staying back because of the NIL, right? So
right.
now guys aren't staying just because maybe they're not quite good enough to go into the draft. They're staying because they might make more money on NIL than they would as a day 3 pick.
Right.
I'm going to throw another name out here because I have to. I'm obligated. It's my guy, Michael Hall Jr. from Ohio State. He came out. He's an underclassman, a true underclassman who won't be 21 until June. And he measured in. He did not work out. And I'm not sure what the reasoning was there. I don't think he's dealing with an injury. But we've seen this guy pretty active as a pass rusher as a freshman, then dealt with some injuries after that. But he's 6'3", 290. So he's that small, 3-technique type.
Does he play leaner than that? Maybe that's why it didn't work out. He was bulking up for the combine. Does he play leaner than 290?
I would say he plays at about 290.
Okay.
I think that's accurate. They listed him at Ohio State around 290, 295. So there's not a lot of fudging with the weight there. I think it's more Ohio State guys have, outside of a couple guys like Olave Wilson, a lot of Ohio State guys have ducked the combine lately. So it's a strategy.
At Ohio State.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of them don't even run on the fast track, though. I mean, and we saw the guys that could really run fast. They ran. Guys like Ward, Denzel Ward, Olave Wilson. But I don't think – I think Hall was probably dealing with some kind of, either he got advice from his agent not to work out, or he's dealing with something, injury-wise. But I'm not concerned about it, because even when he was injured, he played through it. And he still made an impact, although it's usually, like I was talking about, where a penetrating defensive end or defensive lineman doesn't have to get the sacks. He just has to funnel the sacks to his defensive end teammates.
And that is a perfect segue, because the Cardinals need edge rushers as well, Jess.
Yes. Coming up next on the Rise of C-Red podcast, Best of Cardinals Talk on the web. Let's talk about the edge defenders and the linebackers. Cardinals need pass rush bad. That's coming up next on Rise of C-Red. We're back on the Rise of C-Red podcast, Best of Cardinals Talk on the web. Yes, talk about edge defenders and then talk some about linebackers, but edge defenders. The Cardinals and their one whopping sack over the final 6 games of the season. And I like to point out that even that one sack was a questionable sack. They didn't actually tackle that. That was Justin Fields running out of bounds for no gain when Dennis Gardeck was about 2 yards away. So that's the only sack they had in the final 6 weeks.
I'm a big advocate of fake stats. I enjoy those. So, Justin, I've been wanting to talk to you about this, and I'm interested in your take. Why is Dallas Turner not number 1 with a bullet defensive player in this class?
To me, he is. And so I don't really, I mean, to your point, I don't know why he's not. I mean, he was ultra productive as a true freshman. There was a dip in the sophomore year, but you had Will Anderson there, and you had just like teams were really in tune to those 2 pass rushers. And then this year, Turner makes a comeback in terms of production. He's at 6'3", 247, so a little light for like a really prototype NFL defensive end. And the height is pretty average, but long arms, and then just explosiveness throughout, 4.46 40. I think people are kind of concerned he might be like Vic Beasley, but I don't think he is. I think he's a little bit meaner, a little bit tougher than that. And I liked Vic Beasley, by the way.
He reminds me of Brian Burns, man.
Yeah. So that's a guy who's going to hit free agency and get a big contract.
Well, he's getting franchise tag $24 million this year. So.
Oh, there you go.
And so you look at it, I truly don't understand why Dallas Turner isn't the top defensive player in this draft. There's already the meme going around of Monty Ossenforth's reaction to his,
that was one of my favorite things at the combine. And I thought, man, they're going to take pass rusher over Marvin Harrison.
I know. Pass on Will Anderson and then pass on Marvin Harrison and kill my draft stakes of, hey, this is the best player in the draft, so we're just not going to draft him.
Well, if Bob Keim was still the GM, we'd be talking linebackers first, right?
Yeah, Steve
Absolutely.
Keim would have us.
100%. 100%. Or he never did it. You'd be talking about the big defensive tackle, because he coveted those so bad, and the only time
Devondre Sweat, yeah.
Oh my gosh.
We didn't get into him in the last segment, but too heavy. That's my only take on that. Seth, you've always loved Laiatu Latu, and one of the things that's been most concerning about him is the concussion history, I think, or the neck injury history when he was at Washington.
Didn't he medically retire?
He did.
Yeah.
He did. And then he was cleared. He wasn't cleared by Washington, but he was cleared by UCLA.
And the irony of that, the irony of that is that they didn't clear Jalen Phillips, right?
Right. And then he goes to Miami and becomes a first round pick. But Latu, he was always healthy at UCLA. And that was the last 2 years. And he's been the most productive of any of the pass rushers in this class. He knocked it out of the park with his combine, I think. 4.64 40 at 259.
And dude, the athletic comps I hate them. I absolutely hate them. Because it's borderline TJ Watt.
Oh.
and so I hate when those athletic comps come back.
And it's like, all good players.
Yeah, like Hall of Fame level guys, because you're like, ugh, I don't want to give this guy like you want like give me something on the spectrum that's a little less like yearly playing for defensive player of the year, right? But yeah, I mean, this guy's
just really good, right?
He's phenomenal, man. And like, if the medicals check out, and that's the thing, you know, what's crazy is Watt went in that range that the Cardinals are picking at the end of the first round. I think, yeah, he went 30th. Like, that's the crazy thing is like Latu going 27th. It's not the death knell of like, oh, he's not, you know, going to end up being that. No, man, this is a guy that, like Justin said, incredibly productive while he was at UCLA.
And he's got like the power hands. He's got the know-how, the technique, the pass rush technique. I mean, I guess going back to your last question, why isn't Dallas Turner number one with the bullet? Maybe there's some people that like Latu better. The problem is he's going to be, he's going to turn 24, but it's not till the very tail end. His birthday is New Year's Eve, right?
Yeah,
so he'll play his whole rookie year as a 23-year-old.
Well, and like you said, like I think if you're drafting in the top 10, it's tough to take Latu, even though you've laid out like from a production and testing standpoint, he deserves it. But I mean, when you
got to get a really clean bill of health on the on the medical stuff, and that's the real concern, and that's one of the concerns with not just Latu, but with some of the other guys that are highly touted in this draft too, right?
Yeah, and you look at it, I mean, Latu real quick, 34 tackles for loss and 23 and a half sacks the last 2 years. I mean, this guy's been...
That's great production.
Right, incredibly. Jared Verse, we like him, but we like him probably where he's going to end up going, right? Like mid-late first round type of guy.
Our pushback on Verse was that he was being mocked in top 5, and we didn't see him as that caliber prospect. He transferred from Albany to FSU. He was productive at both places, which we love because when a guy takes a step up in competition, to go from FCS to Power 5, that's quite an achievement, especially when you remain very productive. And Verse had a great combine, man, 31 reps on the bench. He ran a 4.58 at 254. The shuttles are a little below average or right around average. So you wonder if he's a little stiff, which is what you would think if you just watched the tape on him too, because you and I, Seth, have talked about this for years. And our buddy, you mentioned Kyle Posey, who's an FSU guy. We recognize that a lot of the pass rush productivity came from Verse kind of going up the middle, lining up inside, shading inside with another guy outside of him. But it's hard to deny that this guy has good size, prototype height, prototype arm length, and the strength and speed. It's there, the explosiveness. You don't need to be super bendy if you're very explosive. He's going to be a guy, I think I want to say, like, off the top of my head, and I haven't done like a detailed athletic comp analysis, but it kind of reminds me of like a Harold Landry type, where he's got that, like, and I think Landry was bendier, but you still, if you can get a guy in the first round, the middle of the first round, who gets you 8 sacks a year, that's going to be a good pick.
Yeah, and there are some similarities. Like you said, Landry ended up a little bendier. The guy that he really kind of reminds me of is actually Alden Smith out of Mizzou.
He
He
was
actually
super stiff, but,
right, and that's why he kind of reminds me of him because
but he was so productive.
He was so
Yeah,
productive till he started, hanging around,
Right.
having guns everywhere.
Yeah.
And
Well,
cocaine, I think.
yeah. But so versus a good one. And then you look at it, you've got guys like Chop Robinson.
What do you do with
who,
Chop, though? Because he tests like he should be a top 10 pick. He's only 21. Maryland to Penn State, there's a little step up there, but it's the same conference. But only 4.5 sacks this year. It was to me, it was a downer for him. I didn't like him. I think his combine is kind of masking things. I see him as a day 2 guy.
Yeah, I think he is a day 2 guy. I wouldn't take him early, but I mean, let's be kind of honest about those Penn State pass rushers the last couple years outside of Micah Parsons. They haven't exactly lit things up, right?
No, they haven't.
At
I
the
mean, we
collegiate
look
level.
at Odafe Owe. He went late first round.
Ebiketie was super
second
athletic.
round. He hasn't done anything. Yeah, but that's partly Atlanta's fault for trying to play him off the ball.
Hey, Hassan Reddick.
Yeah,
right. Ebiketie's going to sign some cheap free agent deal next year and have 11 sacks. Yeah, but I mean, that's a fair question, Seth. It's like these guys haven't really lit the world on fire. Parsons didn't even brush the passer at Penn State. He was off the ball. He was all over the place. I mean, he's a freak.
Can we talk about real quick one of the bigger, I don't want to say disappointments, but a guy that was overly hyped, and then I think the entire process has now self-corrected with him, and that's Darius Robinson out of Mizzou. Just mentioned him in passing as we talked about the D lineman, right?
He was, interior.
Well, that's the thing.
Yeah.
I've seen him listed on like mock drafts as an edge, but he's built like an interior, and I do see that in the combine he was, he was listed as an interior guy, but with a guy like Robinson, and he did well at the Senior Bowl. Is he one of those guys that is? He's an edge that's built on an interior guy, which is ultimately going to make him less effective as a player.
I think he's going to end up needing to play in a 34, like as an edge type of guy. Again, I hate like comparisons like this, and this guy was more athletic, so it's not fair. But when Justin Smith got to the 49ers, right, and kind of took off.
He was so athletic, though.
I know, and that's why I don't like it, because at the end he was Robinson's size, 6'4", 285. But when he was drafted by Cincinnati, he was kind of a bust. I mean, bust is probably a strong word, but he was the 4th overall pick, and he never had 10 sacks when he was at Cincinnati. But then he kind of bulked up and became that 34 defensive end and became an all-pro, runner-up defensive player of the year, multiple Pro Bowls. Like he changed his game completely. I think that is kind of what you have to, but he's like, again, Robinson is the San Francisco version. And if somebody takes him to be the Cincinnati version, you're probably going to get the same result.
I think what ticked me off watching the combine was the comparisons for Robinson to Cameron Jordan. Yeah. I mean, come on, dude.
Does he match up with like LJ Collier?
Collier was shorter, I think, if I'm recalling correctly. But
he was a guy drafted like as an edge, but was big, way big for what you'd think.
I think he was like what was he, Seth? Like 6'3", 6'2", 289?
No, 6'2", 285.
Right. So he was a guy who played some edge in college, and then like it just didn't translate because he wasn't big enough. With Robinson, that's not the problem. The problem is the athleticism, and just like I'm not sure. I don't have an age on him, but I suspect given the background that
He's
an older
a
prospect.
5th-year senior.
Right. Right.
Least.
So he's probably going to be about 23, 24, depending on what month he was born. Jess, your instincts are totally right. I slot him at interior D-line too, because his numbers look good. If you put him at edge, then it's not as good. The broad jump's bad. The 40 is bad. And
I think you do the same thing with Brandon Dorless of Oregon, who was.
Yeah, I have Brandon Dorless as an interior guy as well.
And so that's the thing you got to be careful with, is that some of these sites are listing them as defensive ends, and it's not a successful testing numbers when you look at that. If you look at this group, Jess, there's a couple that could go, day 2 that could fit what the Cardinals need. It's just, this is a group that's really odd, because you've got a guy like Braylon Trice, who ended up not testing well at all.
Not only that, but he looked really stiff.
To me. Funny thing is in my last mock simulation, I ended up with the Cardinals getting Chop Robinson and Braylon Trice, and your guy Gungus over at Revenge of the Birds is like, don't like your edge picks. You got an athletic guy that's not productive and an unathletic guy that's not productive.
and so Trice is an interesting one. And
I like Trice on tape, but he's stiff. I don't think there's any doubt about that. And then when you watch him run his 40, like he popped straight up. He looked like he took 2 steps backwards before he even ran. It was really ugly.
The guy that really interests me out of this whole group is Jonah Ellis.
I agree. I think he didn't work out though.
No, he didn't work out. That was a little disheartening, but he went the Brock Bowers route, because he came in at 6'2" and 250.
Right.
When he was listed at 6'3" and 230 at Utah.
But the thing is, you got the arm length. He's got 33-inch arms, which is kind of your baseline for. And he was last year. He was so disruptive for Utah. He was ultra productive. And he is super young too. He's only he'll be turned 21 right around draft time. He has huge hands. He has like 10.5-inch hands. So, if we're worried about hand size, also you can run him on the eligible at the goal line if you want to. Line him on the H-back. Yeah, he's got mitts, man. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if he tests at his pro day, because
I think he will.
And because his production shot up. He went from being like, he had, what was it? He had 1 sack to 3 sacks to 12. And He went from 1 tackle for loss 6 to 16. But his impact last year in Pac-12 play, it was undeniable how just basically he's the Arizona State. Granted, the Sun Devils were terrible, but Jonah Ellis completely took over that game. 100% manhandled the Sun Devil offensive line, like single-handedly. Right.
And I know this isn't a super fun comparison for a lot of people, and people look at it and go, well, that's not good. But he kind of reminds me of D Ford, coming out of Auburn. Ford was listed or, measured in a little bit bigger at 252. Ellis is 248. But Ford never tested, Yeah. And Ford ended up having a productive career. If you get Ellis in the 3rd round, I think he could end up being the same type of guy. I mean, you're talking about a guy that had 13 sacks the year the Chiefs went to the Super Bowl. I don't think they won that year.
With Ellis, I was just worried about, I knew he was going to be under 6'3". That was pretty obvious from watching him, but were the arms going to be long enough to counter that? And I say yes. It's close. He's not ideal at 6'2", 33-inch arms. It's very average in terms of height, but if you look at the way he plays, I don't have concerns about whether he's a true underclassman in this age of super seniors And there's something to be said about that and the confidence that it takes to
Well,
throw your name
it makes
into
it
that.
better. It makes it a little easier to project improvement over a 24-year-old who's already at his physical, peak.
Totally. Yeah, totally. I mean, it's always been that way. And only in recent years have we started saying like, well, this 24-year-old guy, I mean, that used to be an anomaly to say this 24-year-old guy is a top prospect. But now it's kind of pushed to the side just because it's so common. And that's only been a thing in the last like 3 draft classes.
Well,
And that's going to end after this year.
yeah. And
So,
a guy like Ellis, like if we're talking a day 2 pick, we're not talking a guy that we expect 10 to 15 sacks a year. You're getting a guy who, if you're getting 6 to 8 sacks a year,
right.
and then peaks out with a couple of double-digit stacks, you've got yourself a great day 2 pick.
Yeah, totally right, Jess.
And the thing that you'll love about Ellis the most is that, and this will hit home, Jess, he plays with the like relentlessness of like a Marcus Golden. Like he is a 100% guy all the time, to the point you're like, how is this guy still going? And I think I think there's something to be said for that.
Sure.
Because it's hard to find guys that play that way. The other nice thing is, Jess, this class, and Justin has been diving into it way more than I have because I'm so sick of the position. This class is loaded at inside linebacker as well.
We got rid of, the Cardinals got rid of all of their they moved all of their top guys away or to a different position, and we find ourselves in a position where they need another linebacker, but we can trust, at least for now, we're not going to use premium picks on them. That said, the Cardinals do have a need at linebacker alongside Kaiser White. Last year they used a journeyman special teamer, and Josh Woods had a fine season. Chris Barnes, and then at the very end of the year, Edwin Papo, a guy who was an athletic freak coming out of college. Don't know what we can expect from him in terms of NFL career, other than, there's some potential there. But yeah, if we're talking day 2, day 3, that's fun stuff. There's some good ones. And then obviously the guy that popped the most at the combine was Peyton Wilson at NC State, where you got, Isaiah Simmons-ish testing at 6'4", 233, a 4'4", 340. That's eye-popping for sure.
Yeah, he lost me some money because I bet on him to go over 4.4 or 4.45, and he went under. I mean, you look at him when he lined up to run that 40, I was texting some of my buddies. I said, he doesn't look like a linebacker. He looks like a shooting guard. He was tall and thin at 6'4". He looked taller than that. I know he came at 6'4" in the 230s, but Peyton Wilson, there's no question about his ability, his athleticism,
and his production is incredibly. He had 138 tackles, 6 sacks, 17.5 tackles for loss, 3 interceptions. Yeah. Well, he did everything.
You look at him, watch him run down fast running backs too. So I was dumb to make that bet because I should have looked at the tape where he's just hair on fire running down quarterbacks and running backs from like across the field. He's a really good player. Seth and I have talked about him a lot. His concern is the injuries. He's had 2 or 3 ACLs, right, Seth?
Shoot.
And then multiple shoulder surgeries. Now, that being said, he's played the last 2 years and he's remained healthy. So we're talking about injuries that go back all the way to high school with this guy. He's on the older side too. He's going to be 24 by the time he's drafted. So, and that's because of the injuries. The reason he went back is because he lost so much time of his career to injuries.
So Seth, would you consider him at 35, or is that too rich for a guy with that history? Like he won't make it to round 3.
I think he might, Jess. I think he might.
I wouldn't mess with him until round 3 at the earliest. Like the injury history is just too much. I mean,
It's a lot.
He is 100. I mean, this is the funny thing is his like comp on top of everything else is Leighton Vander Esch. And so like the fact that he like moves like Leighton Vander Esch, that he plays like Leighton Vander Esch, and then he's unavailable like Leighton Vander Esch is
Exactly.
what the concerning thing is. But I mean, you're talking about a guy that is legitimately a freak of nature. Vander Esch went in the first round, and I don't think Vander Esch had the issues coming out of college that he's had
Right.
since.
Guys, I would say this with confidence. There are going to be NFL teams that do not have Peyton Wilson on their draft board because of the medical.
Yeah, and that's just, I mean, that's what happens with these guys. I mean, when they're that injured that consistently, it makes it hard to
And you're
take
talking
them.
about shoulders
You got and
knees
yeah, you
with
have
a linebacker.
You need your shoulders to tackle.
Yeah, you do, especially with the rules the way they are.
This class though is I mean, Jess's favorite prospect at this group is or Justin, sorry, is Edgerrin Cooper, right, Justin?
Yeah, I love Edgerrin Cooper. I think because you know, he is a true off the ball linebacker, but you have really strong blitzing ability. He had I don't recall off the top of my head, but it was over 7 or 8 sacks this year. And you're talking about a guy, he is right in the middle average range as far as height, weight, 6'2", 230 is what he came in. But you have great arm length, 34-inch arms. He's going to be 23 as a rookie. Not a big deal for defensive guys. Like I said, outside of quarterback, how important his age, I don't really know. But 4'5", 140, and that shows up on the tape. I mean, he is sideline to sideline. He is hair on fire. Similar to Peyton Wilson, not quite as instinctive, but because he's a little bit younger without the injuries, to me, he's my top linebacker easily. And I would, you know, my grade on him is going to be day 2, but I think Edgerrin Cooper is going to go day 1 because there's always that team that needs linebacker or, you know, needs a position that maybe isn't like a first round grade in that class, but you want to get the best guy at the position. So Edgerrin Cooper, I think, is going to be a first round pick. It'll be late first round, in that 25 to 32 range in my estimation, but really good player. And I'm a big fan. After him, there's a lot of depth at this position, but to me, he's the top guy, especially given Peyton Wilson's injury history.
The guy that I've been just kind of eyeballing the whole time, Jess, and that I think would be a great fit at like 66 or 71 if he gets there, is Junior Colson from Michigan. You know, you look at what he's done at Michigan the last couple of years as kind of the leader of that defense.
I would probably rank him as undraftable. I'm just kidding.
and he's just been, I mean, he has just been a completely selfless, productive off-ball linebacker. And you know, he's a little bit bigger and again, a little 238. So he's a little
which
bit
is
bigger.
Interesting because like he's listed on Sports Reference. I don't know if this was earlier in his career. It was 6'2", 225.
Yeah. And he's put on some good weight. He kind of reminds me of a guy that Justin and I pushed back against once upon a time because he was getting first round conversation.
Miles Jack?
No.
Oh, okay.
But a guy that played with Miles Jack, Eric Kendricks.
Okay. Yeah.
Kendricks
has been really good. I mean, was he
right.
like a top 15 pick? I don't
he ended
so.
up going 45. Right. He ended up going 45 and he went to the right spot. I mean, that's the thing that
right. So we were correct.
Yes. And so if you can get a guy like Colson on, you know, in the third round, that would be ideal. Jeremiah Trotter's another guy. I don't know if you saw the comparison.
Never heard of him.
Yeah, exactly. Between he and his dad in terms of size, which was
His
really
dad
interesting.
weighed 260 coming out.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Jeremiah Jr. weighs 228. But, you know, we're in a different age now. We're into fitness. We're into holistic medicine, that kind of thing. So I kind of get it.
Exactly.
We're not just down into Wendy's triple cheeseburgers before practice.
This is a guy that I think if they weren't counting on Kaiser White, you could look at him as a guy that would fit. But I think two smaller interior linebackers would be tough. It's not it's not impossible, but I think it's less than, you need more of a slightly bigger, more physical guy as that second guy. But Trotter's a guy that's going to be available in that range. And then a guy I really like, and not just because Justin's on the podcast, but Tommy Eichenberg is a guy that's been around forever at Ohio State. I think he's in his 17th year, right?
He's actually, he's still actually only 23. I mean, surprisingly, he has been around forever. I'm glad you mentioned Eichenberg because I was going to back off on the Ohio State guys on linebackers because I got a couple other guys in mind, but go ahead.
Well, it's just with Eichenberg, you see a guy that's been a 3-year starter, incredibly productive in those 3 years. Again, a leader of a defense, and their defense got increasingly better over the last 3 years. And that's the thing that you look at with what he's done that you see and you're like, okay. And you know what? Eichenberg is the type of guy that you draft at like 105, right? Like
he's a gamer, man. I mean,
yeah.
The thing is like he got hurt this year and he wanted to come back and play. And Ohio State's medical staff, I think to their great credit, they are super cautious. There are times when you see an Ohio State guy being held out of the game and he is jumping around and celebrating on the sideline. It's not the player's call. Their medical staff works closely with the coaching staff, keeps guys from harming themselves. So I think that's a great credit to that staff. As fans, we don't like to see it because we would love to see those guys go out there and play with a club on their arm if they want to, but it's not always the case. Sometimes it's just not the kid's call. That was especially the case with Eichenberg this year. I like him a lot. I mean, I think he's like a 5th to 7th round guy, but and so is Steele Chambers out of Ohio State, a converted running back, probably more like 7th round undrafted free agent there. But yeah, I'm glad you mentioned Tommy. I'm going to mention a couple other guys because we don't have to dwell on linebacker too long, but we got to look into Edifuan Ulofushio from Washington, and I hope you guys can correct me on
that sounded exactly right.
Ulofushio, that looks right to me.
I don't know, but this guy had a fantastic combine. I'm going to have to circle back to him, to be honest. I didn't know too much about him going in.
Here's the thing. Yeah, here's the thing with Olafoshoyo is he came in at 6 feet tall, and you know how people
but
you know how people get about that. But he
ran 4.6, 39-inch vertical. He might be this year's Ivan Pace. You know what I mean? Yeah. Which is a guy we were super high on. We had him in our top 5 linebackers. He goes, undrafted or 7th round and ends up being a fantastic rookie for Minnesota. A couple guys I want to mention, Curtis Jacobs, sticking in the Big Ten. He's a really good player. Middle linebacker, tested well, been productive. A guy who gave opposing Big Ten offenses fits. And Cedric Gray from North Carolina, who came into the year, I think a lot of big draft guys had him as like a day 2 guy. And now he's kind of gone unmentioned for a long time. But he had a really good weekend too. Like average size, good arm length, really tested above average in terms of the 40 and the jumps, and he's been highly productive. So I like Cedric Gray a lot.
Coming up next on the Rise Up Sea Red podcast, Best of Cardinals Talk on the web, we will wrap this up talking about defensive backs, cornerbacks, and safeties. That's coming up next on Rise Up Sea Red. We're back on the Rise Up Sea Red podcast, Best of Cardinals Talk on the web. Defensive backs, definitely a need the Cardinals have. They threw numbers at the position last year with young guys. They drafted 2. They had 2 undrafted guys that ended up starting for them. But cornerback definitely could be in play. Especially at 27, right?
Josh, real quick, let's run through safeties because they're not going to draft one unless they trade Budda Baker. And there's not, I mean, it's not a bad class, would you say, Justin? But there's definitely not the flair of before. But corners are
No,
really
I mean, with safeties, the safeties that you're gonna like are guys that we might move from corner. So
exactly. But I mean, you had Tyler Nubin didn't test. He's kind of the consensus safety 1, and then he came in at 6'1" and 199 pounds.
He might be consensus safety 1 unless you think Cooper DeJean is safety 1, right? Which I think he is. I'm putting Cooper DeJean as a safety because I view him as that like Tyrann Mathieu type.
Cameron Kitchens, incredibly disappointing combine, right?
Yeah, I mean he's in that category. I mean 4.6, 540. You look at his tape, and there's a lot to like. So I don't think he's going to. Was Tony Jefferson undrafted?
He was.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't think he's going to go that far where Kitchens is just undrafted, but it is jarring to see a guy. And Seth, you and I usually do our defensive back safety work late, like after everything else is done, because it's just not a position group that's conducive to like the type of tape that we get, right? We're not breaking down too much all 22. Sometimes you get some, sometimes you don't, but what you look at with the athleticism production, Kitchens was a major disappointment, I think, across all draft nicks, even big draft. And now I say this, with a grain of salt because he still looks really good on tape. And so, I wouldn't say he's undraftable. I would say he's more like, if you can get him 3rd, 4th round, you could still take that guy, but you have to have kind of a specific idea for how you want to use him. And that's going to be scheme specific, and it's not going to be for every team.
The other guy that's kind of gotten some run is Javon Bullard, the Georgia safety. I thought he had an okay combine, but he came in like, I think 10 pounds lighter than what they listed him at in college.
I got to look this up. So Bullard, did they list him at corner or safety? You're right. They have him at safety. He was 198, and he's got extremely short arms, but he ran well. And
he did.
The thing I'll say about a Georgia guy, and I'm saying this, I'm speaking in generalities right now because I haven't done a deep dive yet into DBs, but you're going to gravitate toward defenders from a team like Georgia where they had a great team defense, right?
Yeah, and Bullard was used as like a big slot. So again, I just don't know how this safety group, unless they trade Budda Baker, there's really not a guy that fits. But like you said, this corner class offers a lot of intriguing guys that could be moved to safety.
Well, and so the guy I'm thinking of is Mike Sanderstill from Michigan, because he is kind of the Honey Badger comp from this class. He's 5'9", 182, small hands, short arms. Everything is below average. whether you put him at corner or safety. And the interesting thing about this kid is he started as a receiver at Michigan and then transitioned to defense and then became one of the best defensive backs in all of college football in terms of production. Now, he's an older guy. He's going to be 24 years old in October, but he knocked it out of the park, I thought. 4.47 740, explosive jumps, the short shuttle, the three cone, they were in well above average range, whether you put him at corner or safety. So to me, he is one of the most exciting players in the entire class. I think he's a day 2 pick, but he's a real football player. He's a football guy. I mean, he will do whatever it takes. He was when they had him at receiver, he could beat the DBs. When they put him at DB, he was making plays. He was a ball hawk. He was instrumental in Michigan winning the national championship. And he's probably my favorite Michigan guy in this class.
The other guy that I love that's in the same vein is that is the kind of has that honey badger mentality. He's a little bit bigger, but Chris Abrams-Drain, and by bigger, I mean a little taller, 5'11", but 179. He tested well, ran a 4.44. He didn't jump extremely well, but you go back to what Tyrann Mathieu did, virtually the same jumps. So
I love Abrams-Drain. I mean, he is Seth, you and I talked about his teammate, Ennis Rakestraw, on our Patreon show last week. I think we both came out of this weekend still thinking that we like Abrams-Drain better.
Yeah, and he's a guy that, on day 2, if you added him or Mike Sandstrel, I don't want to go as far as saying it, but like, who is the defensive back that has the wife that likes to talk on Twitter?
Grimes.
I couldn't. Yeah, they play like.
Wait,
that.
who was it, Jess?
I don't remember first name. Grimes is the last name.
Grimes, yeah, Brent Grimes, I think.
Yes, and then, or Cortland Finnegan. I don't know if you guys remember.
I remember him.
Obviously,
yeah. Famously got into a fight with Andre Johnson.
Yeah,
yeah.
So like that's who these guys remind me of. Like just
you need those guys. You need those guys on your team. I mean, those guys are tone setters, right? That's why I love Samerstill. And and guys like DeJean, man, he's a tone setter.
So you look at 27, Jess. I don't think Terrion Arnold's going to be there. He's kind of the consensus top guy. I don't think he tested as well as people had hoped. His jumps were very good.
It was just a 40. And again, like, let's get some GPS on him because, he's played the slot. He's played outside. He held up well on both roles. So I don't think he's slow. And even 4.51 or whatever he tested, that's not a deal breaker, right?
Yeah. I think the guy that's going to end up going first from corners, though, is going to be Quinyon Mitchell, the Toledo corner, who's, we talked on the other show earlier this show, about Braden Fisk, and the Senior Bowl. Mitchell was kind of the same thing and then backed it up with a completely elite combine running a 4.33 at 195
interestingly
pounds.
too, Seth, Quinyon Mitchell has some good tape against Marvin Harrison Jr. from 2 years ago. Yeah. Now, Harrison, if I recall correctly, still beat him for a touchdown, but Mitchell was all over it. I mean, the coverage wasn't the problem. It was C.J. Stroud and Marvin Harrison were the problem.
Right. And he's the guy that's probably, if you trade back, Jess, he could be the guy that you look at to kind of be your corner one, but he's going to go, I'm going to guess he ends up in the top 15. Let me ask you about this.
I agree.
let me ask you about this, and because I don't know if this guy fits with what the Cardinals want at corner, and that's Nate Wiggins, the Clemson corner, 6'1", but 173. He's a coverage guy, and I don't know if he brings the physicality that they would want,
especially as much zone as they like to play.
Right, and it kind of takes away from what he does. I just don't see a guy. He's super thin, like super thin.
Yeah, I mean he's heavier than like Emmanuel Forbes, but he doesn't have the length.
Right.
I mean, one of the things that's glaring about Wiggins is short arms, and then he
30
pulls
and a half
up
inch arms.
right, and then gets hurt running his 40.
You look at this group, I mean, obviously Kool-Aid McKinstry has the Jones fracture. He couldn't work out. Cooper DeJean is recovering from an injury as well. Didn't work out. But the size of this group is interesting because you have a lot of 6 foot plus, 190 pound plus corners in this class. DeJean's a guy that I've seen kind of be looked at as a strong safety. Or a corner in a heavy zone.
Well, let me ask you guys this. I mean, do you think he's a corner? Because I think the consensus is he's not.
I
kind of been in the school of thought of that he could be, but he'd be better as that overhang defender type, that honey badger type, because of what he does well. He does everything so well. He's a special teamer. He's that type of guy to me.
So the guy that I think he could play like, and I think he's actually more athletic, but they're similar in size, is James Bradbury, who had an all-pro season under Jonathan Gannon in Philadelphia. So that's why I don't mind DeJean if they get him and put him at corner. Because I do think he could play in that role where, because they run heavy cover 3. They like their defense or their cornerbacks to come up and be physical in the run game. I think he does all of that. But like you said, if he doesn't work out, he looks like a starting safety with kind of ease at that point.
What about a guy, Georgia, Kamari Lassiter, obviously some connections with the team because his dad, Kwame, played many years for the Cardinals, great defensive back. Didn't do all the testing, but that 3-cone, 6'2", 5, almost 6 foot, just under 6 foot, 186. How is the physical traits for that? And obviously playing for Georgia, you kind of get a bonus there as well.
To me, he profiles as a slot defender because you have the short arms there. And it depends on what Gannon's looking for. But looking at the Philly corners, when he was there, he did have I'm sorry, I can't remember the kid's name. The guy from Pitt. That he had, that was clearly a slot guy, undersized, but he played outside. So I think you can work with that guy. Lassiter is super quick. Again, a part of a great defense at Georgia.
Avonte Maddox is who you're
Yes, it was Avonte Maddox. Thank you, Seth. So you've seen where, Gannon is not immune or gun shy about playing a guy who is smaller and has shorter arms on the outside. And Avonte Maddox was super productive, a really good draft pick at that could go from slot to outside, but you don't want him playing outside. And I think that's kind of the same way with Lassiter. I think he would be, we could talk about this another time about the draft value of like drafting a nickel, but that's Lassiter to me. So 3rd round, whatever, that sounds good. I think you could make that work.
A guy that really had a great combine and then has, a sub 6 foot, sub 190, but has longer arms, over 32 inches. And like I said, incredible combine, Max Melton out of Rutgers.
Right.
You look at him, he's going to get a chance to play outside early, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, for sure. Max Melton. I thought he had a really good year. Again, a Big Ten guy, so I got to see him a lot. But he's got the length. He's young. He's incredibly athletic. His brother plays in the NFL. I mean, he's a better prospect than his brother Bo, who went, I think, 7th round. But Max Melton, every time I saw him play, he stood out. And it was on a team in Rutgers where you don't have a lot of standouts. So, I'm watching games where Rutgers is playing Michigan or Ohio State or Penn State, and you've got this guy who looks like he could play for the other team. So that's one of the things that stood out to me about Max Melton. I wasn't surprised at all that he had a good combine. I knew he was going to. And it was just kind of a matter of, and to some big draft guys' credit, they were talking about Max Melton last summer, but he kind of went quiet during the season because Rutgers is just not a high-profile team. And now he's back into the stream of consciousness. So I really think to me, he's going to be a second-round pick.
A guy that's really interesting to me because of his size and length, and he profiles physically similar to Trevon Diggs, and neither of them have tested. We'll see if TJ Tampa out of Iowa State does test, because Tampa came in at 6'1", 190, but has long arms. Trevon Diggs measured in at 6'1". He's a little heavier at 205, but long arms. I like the measurement similarities. Obviously, I want to Diggs has been phenomenal in Dallas, so everybody knows I hate making comps like that, but he's a guy that profiles size wise similarly that you could look at on day 2 if you're the Cardinals.
Sometimes you just have to look at the name, and TJ Tampa is an incredible draft name, and there's no reason he shouldn't go outside of the first round. I'm kidding. But yeah, no, TJ Tampa, to Seth's point, he's done everything that he's needed to do in draft season to get awareness. So we do need the numbers on him. We need a little bit more info, because all we know right now is he's got the height, he's got the length. I haven't done work on his production, but the fact that he's invited to the combine, man, you would have liked to see that guy test, but he's going to have his pro day.
The last guy I want to mention is Cam Hart out of Notre Dame, because
you had to mention Notre Dame guy, or your wife would have been mad, right?
Yeah, and he came out at 6'3", 202, so really, really big. But you look at his testing numbers. He had an elite vertical at 39.5 inches. His broad jump was 10.10, which is insane. And then his 3-cone and short shuttle were above, were good enough. They weren't elite by any means, but they were good.
They're definitely below average if you're looking at corners. Now, not way below average, just kind of borderline.
Right. And so you look at him, he's a late day 2. I mean, I would think at best in that 75 plus range, but I wouldn't be shocked to see if he went in round 4. But he, with his traits, again, a big cover 3 corner that does tackle well, that can help out.
So can he play safety?
That's a fair question. Because
that's what you're going to be looking at with a guy like this, because if you look at the shuttles and you put him at safety, at his size, it's not bad. But you're talking about that's what we do as draft analysts. Like, we have to project a little bit. Can they move? Can they move to a different position? Can this tackle play guard? Can this center play guard? Can this corner play safety? Right? And that's what we're doing with Samerstill, I think, to a point, because Michigan played him a lot of corner. And we see him as a safety, right? Is Cam Hart, because I like Cam Hart quite a bit. He showed up in coverage really well against Ohio State, against tough receivers. But is he a corner in the NFL, or is he a safety? And you're looking at scheme there, right?
Yeah.
Is there even a specialist that's worth looking at? Kickers, punters.
If there is, I don't know.
Well, if that's the case, we will wrap up this edition of the Rise Up C-Red podcast, the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web, episode 522. A big thanks to Justin Higdon for his time on the 2 episodes that we've done this week. It's a lot of talking. We are late at night. He is not here in Arizona, so he is staying up extra late for that. A big thanks, Justin. Thanks for coming on. I'm sure we'll have you next year as well.
It's my favorite show of the year, guys.
And I love having you on, man. So that's Seth Cox. That's Justin Higdon. I'm Jess Root. This is the Rise Up C-Red podcast. We'll be back again next week for free agency.
Thanks for listening to the latest edition of the Rise Up C-Red podcast. Listen to previous episodes and subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher Radio, Audioboom, or many other podcast platforms, so shows are delivered directly to your mobile device. Please give the show a 5-star rating and always support the sponsors who support the show. We'll be back soon for the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. Rise up Red C, be Red C-Red, and of course, Rise Up C-Red.